Because we're 3 months into the NBA offseason, I've been seeing a lot of all-time conversations in basketball social media circles and TV and podcast outlets. Top 30 all-time rankings, best big men of all time, biggest what-ifs in NBA history, generic offseason slop like that. But there's a player left off these types of lists that I feel like really flies under the radar in the wider landscape of basketball history: Bill Walton. Dedicated basketball fans have probably all heard of Walton in some way or another. They might know him from his legendary career as a college basketball color commentator, his outstanding run at UCLA, or for being a prototypical passing big man. But very few people know how great he truly was. His college hoops resume is practically unmatched, and in the league he won multiple championships and was arguably the best player in the world when healthy. Today I'm going to recount the sheer excellence of Bill Walton's career, the legend the NBA forgot. I'd like to keep this video focused on Walton's basketball career, but it's impossible to tell his story as a player without first understanding his unique personality. Walton grew up in San Diego, the second oldest of 5 children. He describes his childhood as a non-athletic environment, but being so tall at an early age, he became interested in basketball and soon excelled at it, leading his high school team to 49 straight victories. Walton was very much engaged with the 60s and 70s hippie culture of California throughout his adolescence, and in fact he actually got arrested for protesting the Vietnam War at UCLA and had to be bailed out by his coach. This culture would shape his personality for the rest of his life. Walton's excellence at youth basketball made it obvious that he would continue his career to the next level. When it came time to decide where his next steps would be, Walton didn't need to think too hard. Legendary coach John Wooden had won 6 of the last 7 NCAA championships at UCLA, forging the skills of legendary players like Gail Goodrich and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the process. This success, combined with the opportunity to stay in Southern California where he grew up, made this an easy choice for Walton. The 1970 through 71 season was Walton's freshman year, and despite being such a highly touted prospect, he wasn't selected for the varsity team. The freshman team went 20-0, and according to sources, Walton averaged 18 points per game on 68% shooting, although I can't find any official box scores to verify this. The next year, Coach Wooden deemed Walton to be ready for the big leagues, and Walton would take this opportunity by storm. The varsity team had won the NCAA title the previous year, and eyes were on Walton to defend it, as their star forward Sidney Wicks had gone to the league that offseason. By the end of the regular season, it was clear that Walton was immediately the best player in college basketball. He averaged 21 and 16 on an incredible 64% shooting. Few recordings of this season are televised, and stat recording was pretty limited back in the day, so this information is really all I have to go off to judge his first year. But this year, Walton won essentially every award he was eligible for, including the Naismith Award and every recognized Press Player of the Year award. He led the NCAA in rebounds, was 8th in true shooting percentage, and was 3rd in the Pac-8 in points per game. Despite winning all these accolades, the 1972 NCAA tournament was where Walton would truly cement his status as the king of college basketball. In the round of 16 against Weber State, Walton took it easy, playing just 20 minutes and attempting 1 field goal, which he made. In the round of 8, Wooden eventually decided that he had to lock in a little more and played Walton for a normal amount of time. Walton put up an efficient 19-11 and a 73-57 win against Long Beach State. Walton was starting to heat up, and in the semifinal game against Louisville, he would catch fire. In his best career game up to that point, he would put up 33 points on 84.6% shooting, going 11 for 12 on free throws and grabbing an unbelievable 21 rebounds against a strong Louisville defense. Walton's rebounding instinct is on full display this game. His height helps him, but he's a master of positioning for the predicted bounce off the rim, and actually boxes out instead of leaping at the ball whenever a shot misses. This is basic youth level coaching now, but in the early 70s it was anything but. His basketball idol was Bill Russell, so it adds up that he made this a big part of his game as a youth player. In the finals, Florida State had clearly learned from the mistakes of Long Beach and Louisville, and their 2 bigs, Reggie Royals and Lawrence McCray, did a decent job of containing Walton, who had put up an impressive 24 points but on 52.9% shooting. They couldn't stop him on the boards, however, and Walton got another 20-burger on the rebounds column, leading UCLA to an 81-76 win and their 8th championship in 9 years. This tournament established Walton's reputation as a big game riser, something we'll keep an eye on for the rest of his career. Walton's junior season was a continuation of this excellence. He put up nearly the same stat line as the last year with 20 and 17 on 65% shooting. A bit more footage exists of this season, and I really notice his dominance on the defensive end here. Slow-moving bigs are often ridiculed in the modern NBA due to high-gravity players being able to draw switches at will and drag big guys out to the perimeter. But pre-3-point line, this didn't really happen. Players would drive in the paint against Walton, and with his length and footwork, they didn't even try to shoot against him, just pass out and reset the offense. How anyone scored in this era is beyond me, but that's beside the point. Yet again, Walton won every relevant award he was eligible for. Walton's 1973 tournament began relatively lackluster by his high standards. He dropped an efficient 28, 14, and 6 in the first game against Arizona State, then had a rough game with 9 points and 14 rebounds against San Francisco, then 14 points, 17 boards in the semifinal against Indiana, but with an impressive 9 assists. I'll touch a little more on Walton as a passer later, but it's important to realize that his passing style was a little different than what we see today from big men. When we look at today's great passing big men, such as Jokic or Sabonis, we typically see the offense run through them. They'll get the ball from the guard at the high post, and then will usually rely on off-ball motion and rub screens to create an open cutter or a jumper look for another player. And if this action fails, they'll use their above-average ball handling for their size to get to the basket and either force an ISO against an opponent's big, or get help defense to arrive and pass out to the open man. Walton's passing, at this time at least, was nothing like this. He definitely pioneered some of the advanced passing after a rebound that guys like Jokic do, but most of his actual assist numbers were from working in the low post, getting stopped, then seeing an open cutter and weaving a short little pass to get around his man, then setting up his teammate for an immediate finish. We don't see this anymore because modern NBA offenses operate with so much more space, so there's less players close to the basket, but I think this would still be effective against modern rim protection if you have off-ball players fast enough to break away from their man and get to the basket before help arrives. The main takeaway from this passing tangent is that Walton was still playing winning basketball in the 1973 tournament, although not putting up the dominant numbers fans came to expect. However, in the NCAA tournament championship against Memphis, this would all change, and Walton would have what many consider to be the best individual game of college basketball ever played. Full footage of this game is available, and it's remarkable to watch. Walton is a great finisher as is, but this game he simply could not miss. He scored 44 points in 33 minutes, shooting 21 of 22 and grabbing 13 boards, while playing some impressive defense against future NBA player Ronnie Robinson. UCLA blew out Memphis 87-66 for yet another championship. Going into his senior season, Walton hadn't lost a game at UCLA. 60-0 in the regular season, 8-0 in the tournament, the team was riding an 88-game win streak that began Walton's freshman year before he was even on the team. Walton was a natural-born winner, and he wanted to keep this streak up for his final year before he would inevitably go to the league. Walton injured his back again in a game against Washington State and played the next week against Notre Dame in a back brace. UCLA went out to a big halftime lead, but in the final 3 minutes, Notre Dame got hot and erased an 11-point lead. Walton took a 12-foot jumper in the final seconds, but it missed and the winning streak was broken. Walton played an incredible game considering how much a full back brace limits mobility, finishing with 24 points and 9 rebounds. However, he was almost inconsolably disappointed. Walton described his performance as a complete failure on all levels, particularly as a human being. A disgrace to the game of basketball, a disgrace to the sport. Walton's desire to win is nearly unmatched in basketball history. Reading this, it really reminded me of Jerry West talking about the depression he felt after not being able to get over the hump and win a championship. UCLA's struggles would continue this season, dropping 3 more games, although Walton can hardly be faulted. He played through lingering back injuries but still fully missed several games. His stat line remained impressive, averaging 19 and 15 on his best efficiency yet, but he was clearly disappointed. He won the Naismith Award, but several press awards would go to NC State's David Thompson, a future NBA legend in his own right. The 1974 NCAA tournament started hot for UCLA. Walton put up 27 and 19 in a 111-100 win over Dayton, then 17 and 9 in an 83-60 win over San Francisco. UCLA looked to be still in the running for another championship, but in the semifinal, they ran up against an incredible NC State team led by none other than David Thompson. Walton had an incredible game, putting up 29, 18, and 4. The game went to 2 overtimes. This game is also on the internet and highly worth a watch. UCLA was up 75-74 in the final minutes, but David Thompson nailed a tough midi, sending it to 76-75. UCLA would foul several times to get the ball back, but NC State hit their free throws, winning 80-77. Walton's anger at himself is honestly hard to read about. "That failure has plagued me and will," he said. "It is a stigma on my soul. There's no way I can get rid of it." That's the timelessness of pain and suffering, the agonizing, the reflection, and the endless questioning of yourself. When you're right there, and it's there for you and the whole world is watching, and it's recorded as history that can never be changed, that is a terribly heavy burden. Keep in mind, these words were said nearly 40 years after the game. I can't even imagine how he felt immediately after. Initially, he refused to play in the third-place game, but Wooden made him play 20 minutes in what would be his last ever collegiate game. 20 minutes too much, he said about that game. Despite Walton's feelings of inadequacy, he was still clearly one of the best prospects in NBA history up to that point. In the 1974 draft, he was selected first overall to the Portland Trail Blazers. It's important to realize the context of Portland as a franchise at this point. The team was 4 years old and one of the smallest markets in the league, finishing last in the division each season. They had a solid duo consisting of point guard Jeff Petrie and forward and UCLA alum Sidney Wicks, but the rest of the team was straight bums. No one except Boston was running truly advanced offensive schemes at the time, but the Blazers were especially bad, playing essentially isolation basketball. Wicks and Petrie made it work on the offensive end through pure skill, but they were dead last in defensive rating. Considering these issues, Walton's fit was exactly what they needed. In an era where a good big was necessary to score and draw gravity to create open chances for others, Walton's elite post-scoring game would allow a real offensive system to form, and Walton's big and coordinated presence in the paint would seriously hinder opposing offenses, especially since most of the shot volume was within the paint in this era. Bigs have had outsized defensive impact for the league's whole history, but pre-3-point shot, it was insane how much of an impact a great defensive big could have on a game. This impact was immediately felt in the 74-75 season. Walton's coordination and footwork as a rim protector almost solely improved their defense from dead last to 6th in the 17-team league, recording 2.7 blocks for himself as well. In his first 7 games, Walton averaged 16, 19, and 4 with 4.4 blocks a game, almost more impressive than his college stat line despite being a rookie. Walton drew a comparison to Bill Russell from legendary Celtics player and Lakers coach Bill Sharman. However, the injuries which began in college began to hinder him again, with Walton finishing the season playing 35 games and averaging 12, 12, and 5 on the season. Despite his foot problems, Portland won 11 more games than the previous season. The next season was a steady improvement from Walton on all aspects of the court. He was healthier, playing 51 games, took 5 more shots a game on similar efficiency to his rookie season, averaged 13.4 rebounds compared to 12.6, and stayed at about 4 assists a game. Despite Walton's improved skill and availability, Portland dropped back to 5th in the Pacific Division, with their offense this time becoming the problem, at 17th of 18 in the league. Petrie and Wicks' athleticism was dropping, so the ISO style was becoming more and more inefficient. Coach Lenny Wilkins couldn't come up with a way to use Walton's talents to reinvigorate the offense into a real scheme. Fortunately, Blazers management realized Wilkins didn't have the skill to lead a team in the rapidly developing NBA and fired him. In this offseason, everything would change for the Blazers because in 1976, the ABA merged with the NBA. In the dispersion draft, Portland would get star forward Maurice Lucas, and the Buffalo Braves also fired coach Jack Ramsey after losing to the Celtics every season in the playoffs, and these two moves would fling Portland into the stratosphere. Ramsey spent years coaching against the Celtics in Philadelphia and Buffalo, and with Walton, he realized he had a player with similar skill sets to Bill Russell, but with several additional areas that could be used to manipulate the game even further. Ramsey described how Russell used the block shot as an offensive weapon, by blocking a shot and then rapidly advancing the ball against an unset defense. With Walton's skill as a passer and a rim-running athletic forward in Mo Lucas, the Blazers caused havoc in transition, not just off-block shots, but off rebounds as well, which Walton got a lot of. 14.4 game and scoring 18.6 points per game, playing his healthiest NBA season to date with 65 games. However, the 77 Blazers weren't just a transition offense. Ramsey utilized Walton to run an effective half-court offense as well. Whereas Walton was typically passing off dribble in the low post at UCLA, Ramsey's offense was what gave Walton the reputation as the proto-Jokic. While watching clips from 77, it's hard not to see Walton and Lucas as a sort of supercharged Jokic and Aaron Gordon. Walton receives the ball while stationary in the high post, Lucas cuts to the rim, and Walton dishes him with perfect accuracy. A simple system. Walton's isolation post scoring was still a major weapon, as well as being one of the few bigs to utilize himself as an off-ball cutter. Bigs in this era would kind of sit on the block, box out the opponents, and then stand with their hands out, waiting for the ball, and then posting up. But Walton's off-ball movement as a cutter really created some opportunities that separated himself from a lot of bigs in this era. If the pick and roll was utilized in this era, Walton would have been one of the best pick and roll bigs in NBA history, in my opinion. It's this diversity of skill sets that makes Walton so impressive. He could be the focal point of an offense paired with slashers with his post passing, or he can play along lobbing or passing true point guards as an off-ball cutter and still generate massive impact either way. In any system, he can use his advanced passing to attack in transition. Ramsey's systems were really quite simple. A big part of his coaching philosophy was that many systems could work depending on personnel, but the execution of a system was much more important than its complexity or design. With a simple off-ball movement-based system, Ramsey's Trailblazers immediately took over the league. They went 49-33, a 12-win improvement over the previous season. In the first round of the playoffs, they went against the Chicago Bulls, led by Artis Gilmore and former Blazer Mickey Johnson. The Blazers won the series 2-1 off big scoring performances from Mo Lucas and great rim protection and passing through Walton. The next series, they would go up against the 50-win Denver Nuggets, led by an underrated big three of David Thompson, Dan Issel, and Paul Silas. This series would go down in a similar way, although it was a lot more tightly contested, even though the 4-2 game scoreline might not convey it. Thompson played incredible, averaging 25 points per game. Walton and Lucas ran their trademark offense, with Lucas as the primary play finisher, but Walton also had an efficient 24-point performance in Game 3. The Nuggets team was a fun-to-watch trio, but the defense was very lacking, and Ramsey's system picked them apart systematically in a very high-scoring series for the time. In the conference finals, the Blazers would have their toughest test yet, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's Lakers. Walton credits Kareem as the toughest player he's ever gone up against, but fortunately for the Blazers, basketball is played with 5 men on the court, and this 77th Lakers team was some straight bums. Earl Tatum was really the only other relevant player on this team. Kareem played an incredible series, but the team basketball of the Blazers swept the Lakers 4-0. The 1977 NBA Finals was between the Portland Trail Blazers and the Julius Erving-led Philadelphia 76ers. Portland went down 0-2, but stayed cool through Dr. J's blitz of a series and won the next 4 straight, winning the championship 4-2. When you look at the box scores for this series, you can really see what made Portland's system so effective. They didn't have a guy scoring 30 a night like the Sixers, or even 20, but what they did have was 4 guys scoring 15 and sharing the rock thanks to Ramsey's precise system. Walton would win Finals MVP off of his impressive performance on both ends of the floor and would finish second in MVP voting and first team All-Defense that season. After the championship series, 76ers coach Gene Shue said, "Bill Walton is the best big man who ever played the game of basketball." Shue had played against Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain and coached against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Walton's next year was perhaps his best individual season. The Blazers started 50-10, with Walton putting up 18-13 on his trademark efficiency with a career-high 5 assists per game. This Blazers team was peak basketball, running easily the most coherent scheme in the era, all enabled by Walton's unique skill set. Walton would win MVP this year, finally getting recognized for his contributions to the best team in basketball. However, the story kind of stops getting better from here. Walton's foot injuries cropped up again, and this time he needed a painkiller injection. This caused his entire lower leg to go numb, and although attempting to make a return for the 78 playoffs against the Supersonics, he was clearly not moving normally and looked like a shell of himself. After the sad end to his most successful season yet, Walton was understandably unhappy in Portland. He felt as if the management had provided him with subpar medical treatment. In fact, he filed a malpractice suit against the Blazers and their team staff. The Blazers medical team was very liberal with their use of painkillers, which can have a net negative effect because it allows you to tolerate pain to play through an injury, despite these injuries potentially not being fully structurally healed. Another Blazer on the team, Bob Gross, played through stress fractures by having pain injections before, during, and after games. The case was settled out of court, so we don't know many of the details, and I might be overstepping my bounds here as a non-medical professional, but I have had a lot of experience with sports injuries and sports medicine myself. And from the stories of what the Blazers staff was doing, I think Walton was probably correct that the care being offered was not in the long-term interests of the players, even if it didn't constitute malpractice legally. This offseason, Walton would request a trade, and when this was not granted, he sat out the entire 1978-79 season. The next offseason, Walton signed as a free agent with the San Diego Clippers. He had a chance for a new beginning with a team that hadn't had a lot of historical success, as well as the chance to return to his childhood homeland of Southern California. Free agency was really weird back then, so the Clippers had to give up 2 players, a first-round pick, and $350,000. And understandably, many Clippers players were irritated with this signing as it felt like their tight-knit chemistry was being interfered with. Walton also signed a massive $7 million contract with the Clippers. Walton's Clipper years were a series of compounding misfortunes. His first year there, he played 14 games after a navicular bone injury. He fully missed the next 2 seasons with foot injuries. The next 3 seasons, Walton would play 35, 55, and then a close to fully healthy season with 67 games and 84-85. In his 6 years with the team, he played 179 games, a little over 2 full seasons. If you look at Basketball Reference, you'll see his assist numbers take a hit over this period. The Clippers were not even close to the levels of precision and planning that Walton was schemed for under Ramsey in Portland, using him really as an ISO scorer, and with his footwork and coordination hampered by injuries, this didn't go too well. In the 1985 offseason, Walton's stock was at an all-time low. His entire time in San Diego was considered a disappointment as they'd missed the playoffs every single year, mostly due to Walton's injuries and the team's subpar coaching and talent. He still felt he had something to offer, however, and the powerhouse Celtics were in the market for a backup center to take the load off big men Robert Parrish and Kevin McHale. They traded Cedric Maxwell and a first-round pick for Walton, a surprisingly big haul for the Clippers considering the state of Walton's career at that point. This was viewed as more of a locker room signing, something like Chris Paul's presence at Golden State last year, where the on-court expectations were minimal, but he could act as a sort of pseudo-coach. However, it turned out that Walton's best years of basketball post-Blazers were still to come. When you think about it, it made perfect sense that Walton would fit into Boston's system. They were an incredibly pass-heavy team, and Bird was kind of a natural evolution of Walton. Bird obviously had more scoring weapons than Walton, which created even more gravity and passing opportunities, but the basics of running the passing through the high post were there. Walton's presence in the paint was felt on defense, but this was no longer one of his stronger areas due to a combination of injuries and the development of the three-point line making a slower big less impactful. He was still anything but a liability, however. In this era, Walton made off-ball screening a big part of his game as well. Boston was a very jumper-heavy team already, and with Walton's presence, this created even more shots for stars Larry Bird and Dennis Johnson. Statistically, these years weren't super impressive, even when you consider Walton's limited minutes, but in terms of playing winning basketball, Walton was finally in a system that he could meaningfully contribute to, and this showed up in team success. The 85-86 Celtics are widely regarded as one of the best teams in basketball history, going 67-15 and winning the championship against Hakeem Olajuwon's Houston Rockets. Walton was awarded the Sixth Man of the Year trophy for his contributions. The next season, Walton's foot injuries returned and forced him into only playing 10 games that season. Walton would retire after the 86-87 season. Walton's career totals are unimpressive. He doesn't crack the top 100 in points, rebounds, or assists, and he only has 2 All-Star, All-NBA, and All-Defense appearances. He's got a Sixth Man of the Year trophy and even an MVP award, but his career accomplishments simply don't stack up with other greats of the game. Walton's influence is the more important story. Walton taught the NBA that an effective and well-balanced offense could be run through a big man and revolutionized off-ball action for bigs in the league. I would consider him perhaps the first truly modern big man, capable of doing things other than rebound and score. Looking at the skill sets of NBA players that followed him, both Sabonis's and Nikola Jokic come to mind as these great passing big men, but virtually every useful center in the league has adapted elements of Walton's off-ball game. Ivica Zubac, Derek Lively, Miles Turner, even this current iteration of Kristaps Porzingis on the Celtics, all have these off-ball screening and rim attacking skill sets that Walton pioneered. It's hard to say what Walton's career would have looked like without injuries. Extrapolating his success on the Blazers, I think it's possible he would have won several more championships and MVPs, but I don't think it's fair to concretely assume that he would have. The game evolves, personnel changes, new stars rise to the challenge, but I think it is reasonable to say Walton would have continued to be one of the best players in the league for an extended amount of time if his feet permitted him. This video doesn't really have a main contention. I'm not here to convince you that he could have been the GOAT or that he had the highest peak in NBA history or anything like that. If you come away with these opinions, that's great, but all I really wanted to do here was share a well-researched, in-depth analysis of one of my favorite players to ever play the game.